The night was ink black over Lake Commando, Italy, and the cold wind carried the acrid smell of cordite and marsh water. It was April 9, 1945, just weeks before Nazi Germany's surrender, but Major Anders Lassen didn't know that. What he knew was that German machine guns had his men pinned down, that every second cost British lives, and that the enemy position ahead had to be taken. Without hesitation, the 24-year-old Danish commando rose from cover, his Thompson submachine gun blazing, and charged directly into the teeth of enemy fire. Behind him, his men from the Special Boat Service watched their commander do what he had done dozens of times before, lead from the absolute front, showing the kind of courage that transcends ordinary heroism. This was vintage Lassen, the Viking warrior who had become Britain's most decorated commando, a man who fought not for glory, but because his beloved Denmark had fallen to Nazi occupation and he refused to stand idle. For 4 years, he had struck at Hitler's forces across the Mediterranean, earning 3 military crosses for raids so audacious they seemed ripped from adventure fiction. He had killed enemy soldiers with his bare hands, captured German garrisons single-handedly, and survived impossible odds time and again. His fellow commandos called him the Viking and the Mad Dane, spoken with equal parts awe and affection. Tonight, at Lake Commando, Anders Lassen would write the final chapter of an extraordinary warrior's life, a chapter that would earn him the Victoria Cross and cement his place among the greatest soldiers of World War II. When German forces swept into Denmark on April 9, 1940, they encountered virtually no resistance. The Danish government, recognizing the futility of opposing the Nazi war machine, surrendered within hours. For most Danes, the occupation meant accepting an uneasy coexistence with their conquerors. But for 19-year-old Anders Frederick Emil Victor Schau Lassen, a merchant seaman's son from Copenhagen with adventure in his blood, the surrender was unacceptable. Born on September 22, 1920, into a family with military traditions stretching back generations, Lassen possessed an almost primal need for action and a burning hatred of injustice. His childhood had been marked by restlessness and physical courage. He was the boy who climbed higher, ran faster, and never backed down from a challenge. When Denmark fell, Lassen was working aboard merchant ships, and rather than return to occupied Copenhagen, he made his way to Britain, determined to continue the fight against Nazism. In London, Lassen volunteered for the British Army and was quickly recognized as exceptional material. Standing just under 6 feet tall, with piercing blue eyes, blonde hair, and the athletic build of a natural warrior, he looked every inch the Norse warrior his ancestors might have been. But it was his psychological makeup that truly set him apart. British officers noted his absolute fearlessness, his lightning-quick reflexes, and an almost supernatural ability to remain calm under fire. He seemed to lack the instinct for self-preservation that kept most men alive. Or, perhaps more accurately, his sense of duty and desire for action simply overrode it. In 1941, after completing infantry training, Lassen volunteered for the newly formed Special Boat Section, a commando unit designed for raids behind enemy lines in the Mediterranean theater. The SBS, later renamed the Special Boat Service, attracted the British military's most daring soldiers, men willing to undertake missions with survival rates that made conventional combat look safe by comparison. The Mediterranean in 1941-1942 was a chessboard of island fortresses, coastal garrisons, and vital shipping lanes. German and Italian forces controlled most of Greece and its islands, and British forces needed intelligence, sabotage, and disruption behind enemy lines. The Special Boat Section operated from bases in Egypt and Cyprus, launching raids across the Aegean Sea in small boats, often kikes, traditional Greek fishing vessels that could slip past enemy patrols. These operations required men who could navigate by the stars, survive on minimal rations, kill silently with knife or garrote, and escape across hostile terrain if things went wrong. Lassen thrived in this environment. His first missions in 1942 involved reconnaissance of German positions on Greek islands, and he demonstrated an uncanny ability to move through enemy territory undetected, gathering intelligence that proved invaluable for future operations. But reconnaissance wasn't enough for Lassen. He wanted to strike directly at the enemy, and he would soon get his chance. Lassen's first major combat operation came in June 1942, when his SBS patrol was tasked with raiding the island of Crete, where German forces maintained airfields and supply depots vital to the North Africa campaign. The mission called for a small team to land by night, sabotage enemy aircraft and fuel dumps, and withdraw before dawn. Lassen, then a corporal, was part of a six-man team led by Lieutenant Stephen Hastings. They paddled ashore in rubber dinghies through choppy seas, landed on a rocky beach without detection, and made their way inland through German patrol areas. When they reached the target airfield, Lassen volunteered to approach the closest guard post alone. Moving like a shadow, he crept to within feet of two German sentries, and in a blur of motion that his comrades barely saw in the darkness, he killed both men silently with his commando knife, a Fairbairn Sykes fighting dagger that became his trademark weapon. The team then planted explosives on 5 aircraft and a fuel depot before slipping back to their extraction point, leaving behind a scene of fiery destruction that would ground the Luftwaffe squadron for weeks. This raid established Lassen's reputation as a natural-born raider, but it was only the beginning. Throughout late 1942 and into 1943, Lassen participated in dozens of operations across the Aegean, each one more audacious than the last. On the island of Santorini, he led a raid that captured an entire Italian garrison of 30 soldiers with only 4 commandos. He simply walked into their barracks in the middle of the night, woke the commander at gunpoint, and ordered the entire garrison to surrender, which they did without a shot being fired. On Simi, he swam ashore alone to conduct reconnaissance, was spotted by German sentries, killed 3 of them in hand-to-hand combat, and still completed his mission before swimming back to his boat. His fellow commandos were both awed and sometimes disturbed by his ferocity in combat. Lassen seemed to transform during action, becoming a focused killing machine who showed no hesitation and no mercy to armed enemies. But Lassen wasn't just a berserker, he was also a meticulous planner and a natural leader. By early 1943, he had been promoted to sergeant and was leading his own patrols. His men noticed that he always volunteered for the most dangerous tasks, always took point on approaches to enemy positions, and never asked his soldiers to do anything he wouldn't do himself. This leadership style created fierce loyalty among his troops, who would follow him anywhere despite the suicidal nature of many missions. Lassen also developed a signature tactical approach: speed, aggression, and shock. Rather than the careful, stealthy approaches favored by other commando units, Lassen preferred to strike hard and fast once contact was made, using the confusion to overwhelm superior enemy forces. This worked because of his incredible combat reflexes and marksmanship. He could empty a Thompson submachine gun magazine with devastating accuracy in seconds, often while running directly at enemy positions. In September 1943, Lassen participated in Operation Roast, a complex series of raids designed to harass German forces in the Dodecanese Islands and prevent them from reinforcing their positions in Italy, where Allied forces had just landed. His patrol was assigned to raid the island of Calci, where German troops maintained a coastal observation post. The mission went wrong almost immediately. The patrol's caïque was spotted by a German patrol boat, and machine gun fire raked the small vessel. Lassen, rather than withdrawing, ordered his men to return fire and rammed the German boat, then led a boarding action that captured the enemy vessel and its crew. With German reinforcements certainly en route, Lassen then proceeded to his original objective, raided the observation post, destroyed the radio equipment, and withdrew with prisoners and captured intelligence. For this action, he received his first military cross, a decoration for exemplary gallantry, with the citation praising his cool courage and remarkable leadership in the face of heavy odds. The raids continued throughout 1943 and into 1944, with Lassen becoming the SBS's most decorated soldier. On the island of Santorini in October 1943, he led a raid that destroyed a German ammunition dump and killed over 20 enemy soldiers in a running firefight through the narrow streets of a coastal village. In November, during a raid on Colino, his patrol was ambushed by a larger German force, and Lassen personally held off the enemy while his men withdrew to their boats, killing 7 Germans in close-quarters combat before escaping himself by swimming half a mile through rough seas with full equipment. Each action seemed to defy the laws of probability. Lassen should have been killed a dozen times over, yet he survived without serious injury while enemy forces fell around him. Some of his comrades believed he was protected by fate, others that he simply moved too fast for bullets to find him. By early 1944, Lassen had been promoted to captain and awarded a second military cross for a raid on Santorini, where he captured a German battalion commander and his entire staff. The citation noted that Lassen displayed outstanding courage and leadership, pressing home the attack with complete disregard for his own safety. His legend had grown to the point where German commanders in the Aegean specifically warned their troops about the Danish devil, who led British raiding parties. Intelligence reports captured by the British revealed that German forces had increased sentries and patrols specifically because of the threat posed by Lassen's operations. This was perhaps the highest compliment. The enemy was changing their defensive dispositions because of one man. In the summer of 1944, as Allied forces advanced through Italy and prepared for the invasion of southern France, the strategic importance of the Aegean raids diminished. The SBS began preparing for new operations on the Italian mainland, where German forces were conducting a stubborn fighting retreat up the peninsula. Lassen, now a major, was given command of his own squadron, S Squadron of the Special Boat Service, consisting of approximately 60 elite commandos. He had become one of the most experienced special operations officers in the British military, having participated in more combat raids than virtually any other soldier. His tactical innovations, particularly his emphasis on aggressive frontal assault combined with surprise, were being studied and adopted by other Special Forces units. But Lassen himself remained fundamentally unchanged, a warrior who lived for combat, who was happiest when leading men against the enemy, and who seemed to possess no fear of death whatsoever. By April 1945, the war in Europe was in its final weeks, though no one knew exactly when Germany would collapse. Allied forces in Italy were pressing north toward the Po River and the Alps, facing determined German resistance from Army Group C under Field Marshal Albert Kesselring. The Germans had established strong defensive positions along a network of rivers, canals, and marshes in northeastern Italy, using the terrain to maximum advantage. One of these positions was the area around Lake Comacchio, a vast shallow lagoon near the Adriatic coast south of Venice. The lake and its surrounding marshes formed a natural barrier that protected the German right flank and threatened to bog down the Allied advance. British military planners decided that commando operations could unhinge this defense by striking behind German lines and capturing key positions before the main assault. Operation Roast was conceived as a multi-phase assault involving the 2nd Commando Brigade, which included Lassen's S Squadron of the SBS. The plan called for commandos to cross Lake Comacchio in small assault craft, seize key positions on the North Shore, and hold them while regular infantry forces followed up. The operation would begin on April 1, 1945, with various units assigned specific objectives. S Squadron received one of the most difficult assignments. They were to capture a series of fortified positions near the town of Comacchio itself, positions known to be heavily defended with machine gun nests, mortars, and entrenched German infantry. Intelligence estimated that at least 2 companies of German paratroopers, elite Fallschirmjäger troops, held the sector, with additional reserves nearby. Lassen spent the last days of March preparing his men for the operation. He conducted personal reconnaissance of the lakeshore, studied aerial photographs of the German positions, and rehearsed the assault with scale models. His squadron would attack in 2 waves. The first would seize the initial objectives, and the second would pass through to capture deeper positions. Lassen, characteristically, would lead the first wave personally. On the evening of March 31, he gathered his officers and NCOs for a final briefing. According to Lieutenant Sean O'Reilly, who survived the war and recorded his memories decades later, Lassen told his men, "We've done this before, and we'll do it again. Hit them hard, hit them fast, and don't stop moving forward. If we can break through their line, we'll roll up the whole position." He was calm and confident, showing no sign of concern despite the intelligence reports indicating heavy German strength ahead. The night of April 1-2 saw the initial phase of Operation Roast unfold successfully. Commando units crossed the lake under cover of darkness and established beachheads on the northern shore. German forces, surprised by the amphibious assault, fell back to secondary positions. Over the next several days, fierce fighting erupted as British commandos pushed deeper into German territory, facing counterattacks and entrenched resistance. Casualties mounted on both sides. By April 8, most of the initial objectives had been secured, but the Germans still held key positions that commanded the approaches to Comacchio. S Squadron had been in continuous combat for over a week, suffering casualties but advancing steadily. Lassen personally led several assaults, at one point charging a German machine gun position single-handedly when his men were pinned down, destroying it with grenades and close-range fire. On April 9, 1945, exactly 5 years after Germany invaded Denmark, S Squadron received orders for another assault. Their objective was a series of German positions near a group of buildings that intelligence had designated as target area. The positions controlled a vital road junction and had to be neutralized before the main Allied advance could proceed. German resistance had stiffened considerably, with Fallschirmjäger units bringing in reinforcements and establishing interlocking fields of fire. The terrain offered little cover, flat marshland with scattered trees and dikes. An approach in daylight would be suicidal, so the attack was scheduled for just after nightfall. Lassen studied the intelligence reports and aerial photos, noting the concentration of German machine gun positions. He told his second-in-command that they would need to close with the enemy quickly to avoid being cut down in the open approaches. As darkness fell on April 9, S Squadron moved into position for the assault. Lassen divided his force into 3 groups. One would provide covering fire from the start line, while the other 2 would assault the German positions in a pincer movement. Lassen would lead the right-hand assault group, approximately 20 men, while Lieutenant O'Reilly led the left. The plan was to advance quickly across 500 yards of open ground, relying on speed and the covering fire to suppress German defenders until they could close to grenade range. At 20:45 hours, 8:45 p.m., the attack began. British Bren guns and mortars opened fire on the German positions, and Lassen's men rose from their positions and began moving forward in tactical formation. The Germans responded immediately with devastating machine gun fire. Tracer rounds lit up the night, and the crack of rifles and the hammering of MG-42s filled the air. Within seconds, several of Lassen's men were hit. The assault group went to ground, taking what cover they could find in shallow ditches and behind low banks. It was a critical moment. The assault had stalled within the first minute, and staying pinned in the open meant certain annihilation. Lassen assessed the situation instantly. The German fire was coming primarily from 2 positions, a machine gun nest about 200 yards ahead and slightly to the right, and another position further back near a cluster of buildings. If those guns weren't silenced, his men couldn't advance, and if they couldn't advance, they would eventually be picked off where they lay. What happened next was witnessed by multiple survivors and later documented in official reports. Major Anders Lassen stood up in full view of the German positions, shouted, "Follow me," in English, and began running directly toward the nearest machine gun nest. He carried his Thompson submachine gun in one hand and grenades in the other. His figure, silhouetted against the night sky and visible in the muzzle flashes, drew immediate fire from multiple German positions. Bullets kicked up dirt around him, tracers streaked past, but Lassen kept running, firing his Thompson from the hip as he charged. Behind him, inspired and stunned by this act of almost suicidal courage, his men rose and followed, shouting and firing as they advanced. Lassen covered the 200 yards in what seemed like seconds. German soldiers in the machine gun nest, shocked by the ferocity of the attack, tried to traverse their weapon to track him, but he was moving too fast and too erratically. He reached grenade range, pulled the pin on a Mills bomb, and hurled it perfectly into the German position. The explosion silenced the machine gun and killed or wounded its crew. Without pausing, Lassen turned toward the second position, which was now firing at him and the commandos behind him. He sprinted toward it, changing magazines on his Thompson as he ran, a feat of dexterity that his men later said they couldn't believe they witnessed under such intense fire. The second German position was more substantial, a reinforced emplacement near a building with multiple defenders. As Lassen approached, firing continuously, German infantry emerged from the building and engaged him at close range. A furious firefight erupted, with Lassen firing his Thompson, then drawing his pistol when the submachine gun ran dry, and finally engaging in hand-to-hand combat with his fighting knife. Witnesses reported seeing him grappling with German soldiers, his knife flashing in the darkness. Several Germans fell, and the position was nearly overrun. For a moment, it seemed that Lassen would accomplish the impossible again, single-handedly breaking through an entrenched enemy position. But then, at approximately 2100 hours, a German machine gunner in a third position that hadn't been identified in the intelligence reports opened fire from the flank. A burst of machine gun fire struck Major Anders Lassen, hitting him multiple times in the chest and shoulder. He fell, mortally wounded, just yards from the German position he had been assaulting. His men, who had reached him seconds later after overwhelming the German defenders, found him conscious but fading. According to the official citation, his last words were asking if his men were safe and if they had taken the objective. When told yes, he reportedly smiled and said, "Good." He died minutes later, still on the battlefield, surrounded by his men and by the bodies of the German soldiers he had killed. The death of Anders Lassen shocked S Squadron and the entire Special Boat Service. In 4 years of the most dangerous combat operations imaginable, through dozens of raids and hundreds of firefights, he had seemed invincible. Men who had served with him struggled to accept that the Viking was gone. But his final charge had accomplished its objective. The German positions were overrun, the assault succeeded, and S Squadron held the ground. The road junction was secured, and the Allied advance could continue. In the days that followed, as fighting continued across northern Italy, word of Lassen's death spread through the commando units and beyond. His men carried his body from the battlefield with full military honors, refusing to leave him behind as they consolidated their gains. Within days of the assault, senior officers began recommending Major Lassen for the highest possible decoration. His commanding officers submitted a detailed report documenting not only his final action, but his entire career of exceptional valor. The recommendation went up through channels to the War Office in London, where it was reviewed by the Victoria Cross Committee. The Victoria Cross, Britain's highest military honor for valor in the face of the enemy, had rarely been awarded to foreign nationals, and never to a non-Commonwealth citizen during World War II. But Lassen's record was so extraordinary, and his final actions so clearly met the criteria of supreme courage and self-sacrifice, that the recommendation was approved. On September 4, 1945, 4 months after Germany's surrender and nearly 5 months after Lassen's death, the award of the Victoria Cross to Major Anders Lassen was announced in the London Gazette. The citation read, in part, "In Italy, during the night of 8th–9th April 1945, Major Lassen was ordered to take out a patrol of 1 officer and 17 other ranks to raid the north shore of Lake Comacchio. The enemy fired on the patrol from prepared positions with machine guns, and Major Lassen was wounded in the first encounter. Disregarding his injuries, he continued to lead his patrol forward against strongly held enemy positions. On at least 3 occasions, he personally led charges against enemy machine gun posts, killing several Germans himself and inspiring his men by his supreme courage and determination. Eventually, he was wounded for a second time, and he died shortly afterwards, but not before he had seen the objective captured and secured." The Victoria Cross was presented to Lassen's father, Lieutenant Colonel Anders Emil Lassen, and his stepmother, Suzanne Lassen, at a ceremony at Buckingham Palace in 1946. King George VI personally pinned the medal and expressed the nation's gratitude for their son's sacrifice. Lassen Kother, himself a decorated military officer, reportedly said that while he grieved his son, he was immensely proud that Anders had died doing what he loved, leading men in combat against tyranny. The ceremony was attended by many of Lassen's comrades from the Special Boat Service, including several who had been with him during his final assault. Anders Lassen became the only non-Commonwealth citizen to receive the Victoria Cross during World War II, a distinction he still holds today. He was also awarded 3 military crosses, a record for World War II: the 1939–45 Star, the Africa Star, the Italy Star, and the Defense Medal. The Greek government posthumously awarded him the War Cross with palms for his service in the Aegean. In Denmark, his homeland, which he had left to fight when so many others stayed, he became a national hero, symbolizing resistance to Nazi occupation even though he had fought under a foreign flag. The strategic impact of Operation Roast and Lassen's final assault was significant. The breaking of German positions around Lake Comacchio opened the way for Allied forces to advance into the Po Valley, leading to the collapse of German resistance in northern Italy. Within weeks of Lassen's death, German forces in Italy surrendered unconditionally, and within a month, the war in Europe ended. While Lassen didn't live to see victory, his contribution to achieving it was substantial. Not just in his final action, but through 4 years of raids that disrupted German operations, tied down enemy forces, and provided crucial intelligence. Beyond the immediate military impact, Anders Lassen's legacy influenced the development of Special Forces doctrine. His tactical approach, aggressive, frontal assault combined with surprise and speed, became part of SAS and SBS training. His emphasis on personal leadership from the front became a hallmark of British Special Forces officer culture. The modern Special Boat Service still honors his memory, and new recruits learn about Lassen's charge as an example of exemplary courage and tactical boldness. The Royal Marines, which absorbed the SBS into its structure after the war, established the Lassen Award for the best recruit in training, and Lassen's name appears on honors boards at Commando training facilities across the United Kingdom. Anders Lassen was initially buried in a military cemetery near Argenta, Italy, close to where he fell. In 1962, his remains were moved to the Argenta Gap War Cemetery, maintained by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. His gravestone, white Portland stone, like all Commonwealth war graves, bears his name, rank, and dates, along with the Victoria Cross insignia. The inscription chosen by his family reads, "He died that we might live in freedom." The cemetery, set among the flat fields of the Po Valley, is visited by veterans, historians, and tourists who come to pay respects to the fallen of that final Italian campaign. In Denmark, several memorials honor Lassen's memory. A plaque was installed at his family home in Copenhagen, and a memorial stone stands in Holmen, the Danish naval base, honoring him as Denmark's most decorated soldier of World War II. The Royal Danish Navy named a patrol vessel after him. And Danish Special Forces units study his tactics and leadership principles. In 2005, on the 60th anniversary of his death, the Danish government issued a commemorative postage stamp bearing his image, ensuring that new generations of Danes know his story. The Special Forces Club in London, an exclusive organization for veterans of special operations units, displays Lassen's Victoria Cross and military crosses in their clubhouse on Herbert Crescent. The display is one of the club's most prized possessions, and veterans often bring guests to view the medals, telling stories of the Viking who earned them. The club holds an annual Anders Lassen Memorial Dinner, where members toast his memory and that of all Special Forces personnel who have given their lives in service. Historians and military scholars continue to study Lassen's career, examining what made him such an exceptionally effective combat leader. Some point to his physical capabilities, his athletic build, reflexes, and endurance. Others emphasize his tactical instincts and ability to make split-second decisions under fire. Still others focus on his psychological makeup, suggesting he possessed a rare combination of fearlessness, aggression, and tactical intelligence. Dr. Martin Gilbert, the renowned British historian, described Lassen as one of the finest fighting men of the Second World War, whose courage and leadership exemplified the very best of the Allied cause. Perhaps the most fitting tribute came from the men who served with him. In interviews conducted over the decades, SBS veterans consistently described Lassen with a mixture of awe and affection. They spoke of his utter fearlessness, his refusal to ask men to do what he wouldn't do himself, and his genuine care for the soldiers under his command. Sergeant Harold Williams, who fought alongside Lassen in the Aegean and survived the war, said in a 1985 interview, "I saw a lot of brave men in the war, but I never saw anyone like Anders. He wasn't trying to be a hero, he just couldn't stand seeing his men in danger when he could do something about it. That last charge at Comando, that was pure Lassen. He knew the risk, but he knew his men needed him to lead, so he did. That's what a real leader does." The story of Anders Lassen reminds us that heroism is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. In an age of industrial warfare, where millions served and millions died, individual acts of courage could still change the course of battles and inspire generations. Lassen chose to fight not because he was conscripted, not because he sought glory, but because he believed deeply that tyranny must be opposed, that freedom is worth fighting for, and that leaders must stand at the front, not the rear. His 3 military crosses and Victoria Cross represent not just moments of exceptional bravery, but a sustained commitment to putting others before self, mission before safety, and duty before life itself. The men and women who served in World War II have been called the greatest generation, and soldiers like Anders Lassen show why. They fought not for conquest or glory, but to defend the values of freedom, democracy, and human dignity against an ideology that threatened to extinguish them. Lassen's story is particularly poignant because he died just weeks before the war ended, so close to seeing the victory his courage helped achieve. But he never wavered, never held back, never calculated the odds in a way that would have kept him safe. He led his final charge on April 9, 1945, 5 years to the day after Germany invaded his homeland, and in doing so, he ensured that Denmark and all of Europe would be free again. His sacrifice, and the sacrifice of millions like him, secured the world we live in today. We owe them a debt that can never be repaid, only honored through remembrance and by defending the freedoms they died to preserve. Major Anders Lassen, the Viking warrior who left his occupied homeland to fight tyranny, who earned Britain's highest honor for valor despite being a foreign national, who led from the front in over 100 combat operations, and who gave his life ensuring his men could complete their mission. His story deserves to be remembered alongside the greatest military heroes of history. He was 24 years old when he died, younger than many of us watching this video, but he had lived more, fought more, and achieved more than most people could in a dozen lifetimes. If you found this story inspiring, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more forgotten stories of World War II and World War I heroes who sacrificed everything for freedom. In our next video, we'll explore the story of another extraordinary soldier, Audie Murphy, the most decorated American combat soldier of World War II, whose actions in France earned him the Medal of Honor and made him a legend. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss it. As we close, let's remember the words carved on so many WW2 memorials. When you go home, tell them of us and say, "For your tomorrow, we gave our today." Anders Lassen and all who served in the Great Crusade against fascism gave their today so we could have our tomorrow. We must never forget.